Hi, good morning, Mystery Quilters. I'm Carrie. Welcome to the 2015 Mystery Quilt. The email that I send out will have all of the measurements on it, but I'm also going to restate them here. You need 6 fabrics. A, which is going to be your center, B, C, D, and E. I forgot the alphabet for a second. B, C, D, and E are going to be the surrounding blocks, and then a neutral is your 6th fabric. So, some caution when you are getting ready to cut your fabric. Week 1, that's today, we're going to just talk about cutting fabric. Always use the same tool you start cutting with to end cutting with, because though they seem like they could be perfectly accurate, they aren't always accurate. Sometimes the paint on an omni grid is different than it is on a different style of a creative grid or creative rulers. They're different depending on, they can be different. And depending on the manufacturer, you could get different measurements. The point is to be consistent. The same thing with a sewing machine. If you start with one sewing machine, end with the same sewing machine. And the same quilter, because 1/4 inches vary between whether you're doing it on as you're quilting it or whether somebody else, whether you're doing it on this machine or that machine, they vary. So the first thing, week 1, the first thing after you've chosen your fabrics, and now I'm doing my big reveal because everybody's seeing my fabrics, the first thing you're going to do is cut. So I've laid my back quarter down with the salvage edges on one side, and I've lined the salvage edges up and folded it and made it nice and flat. Make sure there's no tucks or wrinkles or anything like that that can play havoc with your cutting. I love the June Taylor cutting thing. I'm righty, so I cut backwards. All the numbers are always backwards. I don't know why June Taylor doesn't get me. But, and I'm sure I'm using it wrong, but I cut towards my left hand. So the first thing, this is my color A, and you need just a teeny little bit of color A. But as you can see, it's bright, and it's going to pop in the middle of this quilt for my colorway. So fabric A, I need 1 strip that's 5.5 inches. So I'm going to line this up so that it's straight. Cut the 0 line and 5.5 inches. And then I need 2 strips at 1.5 inches. So from 5.5, that would be 7, and then 8.5. So now I'm done with my color A, and I have cut 1, 2 1.5-inch strips, and 1 5.5-inch strip. Eleanor Burns. Thank you very much for the freedom you've given us, Eleanor Burns. Okay, then colors B, C, D, and E are cut exactly the same, not the same as color A, but they are cut the same to each other, A, B, C, and D. You want 4 strips at 1.5 inches. So I'm going to do a cleanup strip, and then I'm going to go 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, that's 4, and then 1 strip at 4.5. So I'm going to come over here to my 10.5 and cut that. Now I have a 4.5 and 1, 2, 3, 4 of those colors. I know it looks like I have extra there. I do have extra there. That's because I'm going to make 2 quilts, 2 baby quilts. As long as they're going to charity, I can do that. Okay, so this is my color, also my color B, A, B, C, D. They're cut the same. 1, 3, 4.5, 6, and 1 at 10.5. And ooh, that's skinchy. That's because this one is a little bit short. It's all going to work out, but this one's a little bit short because not all fat quarters are cut exactly the same. So be sure you line up that salvage edge and cut from that edge, or make sure that it's straight. Otherwise, you might end up with something that's a little skinchy. Okay, so I'm going to cut my C and D fabrics the same way. Then you need to cut your neutrals. I've got my neutral here, and this happened to have been the end of the bolt. So, you know, that's always wonky at the end of the bolt. I don't know what they're thinking when they do that, but it's always a little wonky. So be sure, in this particular pattern, we have cut the neutral, actually I tore it down the middle from side to side, not from salvage to salvage, but from side to side. So I end up with a long piece, 3/4 of a yard long by 22 inches. So, because in truth, when you're doing strip piecing, you get a whole lot more accuracy if you're doing short strips than if you're doing 22 or 42 inch strips, 44 inch strips. You get a whole lot more accuracy. So in pressing and in cutting and everything. So we're going to just work with the smaller, shorter strips of 22 inches. So now of my neutral, I need to cut 6 strips at 1.5 inches. So I'm going to cut 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, and 9. Okay, that's going to give me my 6 that I need at 1.5 inches. 4, 5, 6 at 1.5 inches. Then I need to cut 12 strips at 2.5 inches. 12 strips at 2.5 inches. Still got that nice and... I took the time to fold this properly. This piece of fabric, I took the time to press it. Always press it. I don't pre-wash, but I do pre-press. Press it properly. Do a clean-up stitch, cut. And now I need 12 at 2.5, excuse me. Pay attention to what I write on the screen, not what I say in my words. 12 at 2.5 inches, so that's 2.5, 5, 7.5, and 10. That's 4 of them. Now I'm not going to bore you with cutting out the rest of those, but the final one that I need is 3 strips at 3.5. And that'll be the end of our cutting until we get to the sashing. Okay, so 3.5. Here's 1. 3.5. Plus 3.5 is 7. Plus 3.5 is 10.5. You ask me why I know this. I'm an accountant in my other life. Okay, and if I made a math error, I apologize. Okay, so that's week 1. Get organized. Be sure you know which one is your A fabric and which is your B, C, D, and E fabrics and your neutrals. Get them all cut up, and I'll see you again here next week.